think John will talk a little bit more about the physical conservation of preservation, but I would like to just say a few words about the knowledge system that goes with this site. We still find that the information available about Hampi Vijayanagara as a city, in terms of its zones, in terms of its architecture, in terms of its historical references, is still lacking. There's not enough information for general visitors coming to the site. I know there have been some attempts to make boards giving information and maps and things, but I still think that more needs to be done. And I think also to discuss or share with the public the unknowns. This may have been this, but maybe it was that. We don't know, because that's interesting for people. They come here and they say, right, not everything is known from the past. We can get involved in trying to decide for ourselves. So I think we are interested in this, and to this end, John and I authored a guidebook, which we are happy to learn is a popular reading material. It's not expensive, it's not big, and I think it performs a function in trying to bring people up to date in a condensed form of as much information as possible. And I think this is a mission that we've always been concerned about, is to share whatever knowledge, even if it's incomplete, with the people who visit the site, who should be, and often are, extremely fascinated with what they come to make people more interested, more knowledgeable. So that's my view, and John, I think, will talk more about the physical, perhaps, aspects.
Thinking about conservation and imagining this site, I'll talk about what could have happened, ideally, in a perfect world, which this is not. First, as an archaeologist and anthropologist, I see this as the material remains of a great city. A city that had vast area covered, protected by outer walls. Within the outer walls there were roadways and temples and villages and agricultural activities carried on, irrigation systems, all kinds of things going on. And then you came closer to the city, the urban core of the area. You had more and more walls, more and more activity, and more dense residential areas, different kinds of people living in different parts of the city, carrying out different activities. Then you got to the rural area, you got an elite residential area, but also an elite performance area where various civic activities, performances took place. So the king manifested his power and the elite manifested their power. Negotiations went on, assassinations probably went on, who knows what the dramas were. But that's not the way the city is conceived or protected today. The archaeological laws are written in a way that carries on the way that the British thought about protecting monuments 100 years ago. And not much about that has changed here. If I'd come here in 1900, I would have bought all the land within the 600 square kilometers, or at least protected as much of it as I could have done, and said that this is an urban park. This is a park that should protect the remains of the city as it's scattered across the landscape. But that's not how it's done today. Today there are 57 monuments that are protected under the law, and some of these monuments are areas that cover a hectare or more, and things within that are protected. But for example, if you're going to understand and appreciate Bangalore, would you only look at the Vidhanasauda, the capital of the city? Would you only look at MG Road, the market area? What about the rest of Bangalore? What about the way that people lived elsewhere within the city? What about the airport? What about the train station, the bus station, the roads leading into the city? They're all part of what a city is. The 57 monument idea does not allow or encourage the protection of things that helps us to understand this as a city as a functioning place in the past. So, as foreigners, all we can do is say we wish it were thought about otherwise, but it's not our responsibility nor our way or our place to criticize. It's just the way that archaeology is carried out here. So I think within the areas that are protected, I would like to see no movement of earth, because every time you move earth, then there's artifacts in the earth, remains of structures in the earth. You destroy the relationships between the artifacts and structures that are there. So a vast amount of excavation going on here, not called excavation, called conservation, but it's not conservation, it's destruction. It's destruction, it's showing for sure that there was a wall here, but what was in the area that was open, what kind of activities were going on there, what's the history of that particular area, is destroyed if you throw all of that earth in the back and during the dark. So I would like to see more thought put into the conservation of material remains that are not just buildings. I have to say that this is not an Indian problem only, it's a worldwide problem. In America and in England and many other places, Italy, the same attention focus by architectural historians on monuments left them not particularly interested to what was between the monuments or around the monuments. So the people would conserve a historic building in America, and then they would just dig around and throw away the dirt. But people lived in the building, they did things outside. There may be a children's play area, there may have been a picnic area, I don't know. All kinds of things might have gone on outside the building that need to be understood to understand how the building functions. Just the skeleton of the building itself is not sufficient. I would like to see attitudes change towards kinds of material remains that might be preserved or studied to understand, get a better picture of how things were done. But I'm not very optimistic that that's going to happen, because to manage a great site like this and to show it to tourists, they want to make the buildings look nice, and they want to have grassy areas in between and where people can picnic. And while these are not traditional and have nothing to do with how Vijayanagara functioned, it satisfies the needs of tourists, that kind of thing. So I perfectly well understand that the demands of tourists and visitors create one set of material developments of the site. The requirements of an archaeologist and scholars will require a different kind of approach. And there it is.
Could I add something? Educating visitors to the conservation and protection of the site is also a mission. And any other site in the world of this scope, this interest, would have something like an information center or a research center where people could go to learn more, hire a guide, buy a guidebook, I don't know. Here at Hampi we are still missing such a thing. We've been talking about it for many years, but this is something I think might be very helpful if one day there could be an actual place where you go. You find out what you want to find out because information is available. That's very difficult here. And what are the conservation and protection policies in place? What are the aims of the archaeologists here? These things should be, I would say, displayed and shared with the public, who should be and would be interested, I think. So we hope that maybe one day there will be such an information center. We are staying in this marvelous hotel, which takes its inspiration directly from particular buildings in the royal center. So this is a royal palace-like building, which is like the royal palaces of the Vijayanagara kings and their nobles. We are sitting here in a building that looks, at least internally, very much like the Lotus Mahal. There's a palace in the royal center. These type of arches you see with these types of curves like this, these types of vaults, these open pavilions, and on top there are these towers So it's an exact sort of copy reimagined for the use of a comfortable, luxurious, I should say, hotel. And the same is true of the main building. And I think this reference is very delightful. So when we took a visitor today, this morning, to visit, I said, here you will see where all this architecture that you've been sleeping in and eating in, where it all comes from. So I think this borrowing, it's charming, it's fine, and it's it's totally appropriate for this resort.
I think it's an amazing active imagination, this place. The thing that's interesting about it is that architecture on this scale, we will have multi-level structures, 2 or 3 story buildings with towers and internal staircases and U-shaped sort of layout. It's all this thing. This didn't happen at Hampi. Hampi was destroyed in 1565 before this building on this kind of scale happened. But it did, and Hampi continued. First in a site called Penakonda, and then near a site called Chandagiri. And there you do see these large palace structures that are multi-story, with little staircases and arcades stretching over great distances. And these buildings, I would say, are post-Vijayanagara city, but still within the feeling of the Vijayanagara Empire, very, very much so. I think people lived in palaces in this city in a way very different from how we live in these palaces here, because they just had a relatively small structure, maybe 50 feet long, 30 feet wide, surrounded by a paved courtyard, surrounded by service buildings, with an elaborate entryway perhaps into the complex. And so they lived very much partly in the open, partly inside, but there was a more open feeling of how they lived. Later on, people became to live more in the way that Islamic palaces were built, not in Islamic style necessarily, but much more interior roof space. So this evokes that kind of life. It's more of the 17th century than the 16th century.
But the sense of luxury that you've been able to guarantee all of your visitors here, whether it's food or comfort, in Vijayanagara times they would have enjoyed whatever was possible from a luxury point of view. They would have been luxury structures. So this is a reimagining, as John put it, of luxury within our context now, the end of the 20th, beginning of the 21st century.
I mentioned that one of the things we wanted to do was map the area where the most concentrated remains of urban life existed. So we employed Bangalore surveyors to map over 12 years, 11 hectares of the royal area, the sacred area, and the areas extending towards the east within a couple of circuits of the walls. And on those maps, we indicated everything on the ground that seemed to be significant, both today, present day, like fence lines, power poles, water tanks, storage tanks, as well as game boards, mortars, and remains of walls, buildings, etc. And because I'm not teaching in the university regularly, I had to build my own small team of people to help me make these maps more reusable. And so we employed a person from Hampi who we helped get trained up in IT work and mapping and all that to improve the quality of the maps themselves, make them more useful, to digitize them, and also to make a database that tells us what each of these things are on the surface of the site. So very slowly over many years, I've been finishing off these maps, working with this man, and I have nearly done with that work. I think within the next year I will have finished it. Then there are more things that can be done with these maps, because there's so much information on the maps that people will be shocked and they won't know what to do with it. We recorded 34,000 things on the maps, and each one of those has a record in the database, and no one can cope with 34,000 bits of information. So there'll be the idea how to make that usable to both for conservation and for scholarly study. So the maps are one of the things that are part of the material record of what we produced over 22 years of research.
So one of the tasks we have to do is to finish the editing of the data to do with the maps, which John is very much involved with. And then we have the problem, what are we going to do with all our maps and drawings, all the stuff that we have accumulated over 21 years, all the pencil drawings, the pencil maps, the ink drawings, the photographs, the notebooks. You can imagine what we have accumulated. Almost all of this is now assembled in our apartment in London. But we are very fortunate because the British Library is a short distance from where we live, and the curator there for historical photographs and drawings became very fascinated with Hampi. Not to do with us, in his own way, and we were able to connect with him and develop a project by which all of our material will eventually go to the British Library. So we are in the process of cataloguing our materials and giving it to the British Library. Already many hundreds of drawings and maps have gone. Still there are more to come, and photographs and transparencies. And the British Library is an excellent institution. You do not pay to join or to use it. Any genuine scholar or student can go to the British Library and request to see anything. It's public material. It has to be made available. Maybe you have to make an appointment to look at maps and things. So we feel that our materials, our work, will be there for the future for scholars and students from all over the world. And there, this material of ours joins material which is older, because in the British Library they have the first map, the first watercolors, and some of the earliest photographs of Hampi, dating back to 1799. So these older materials, these first materials of documentation, are in this library. So we feel this is the best place in the world to place it. So this is our tasks now. Thank you.
So George is working on many other projects. I'm still working both on finishing up the map documentation and then seeing how to make that material available to students and scholars in the future. And I still have things I want to write about the site, write about more about the Mahagalami, for example, building, and there are many little projects that I'm thinking about that I'd like to do. But I'm getting old, and so I have to either find shortcuts or give up. The person we were taking around the site today suggested I should just go out to the site and talk to my phone and say what my impressions are at different places and make that part of a kind of an archival record. That's not a bad idea. But Hampi, I will be involved with Hampi as long as I live, and I feel it's 40 years spent here was a great thing. And I'm very appreciative to the local people and to the local authorities and to the national government of India to have allowed us to work at this great site for so many years and to try to make a small contribution to documenting it and understanding it.
So thank you.